Mode.
Welcome everyone to the Vestibular Disorders Association's presentation on how to apply for disability. I want to introduce our presenters, Jenny Gailey from Gen X Services, Cassie Springer, an ERISA litigation attorney, and Holly Fisher, who is a vestibular patient and a board member of the Vestibular Disorders Association, who's going to share with you her experience applying for this disability insurance. My name's Cynthia Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of the Vestibular Disorders Association. And just so that you know, you can, if you have any questions or you're having any technical difficulties, you can use the questions area or the chat to ask those questions. We will have questions and answers at the end. We also have handouts available that you can download. This recording will be on our YouTube channel afterwards in case you miss any of it, and so that you can share it with other people that you think this might be helpful for. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. I'm going to pass it off to Cassie, who's going to talk about why you should apply for disability. At what point do you decide that it's time to apply for disability, and what are some reasons that that might prompt you to do so? Cassie?
Thanks, Cynthia. Like Cynthia said, I'm Cassie Springer. I'm an ERISA attorney. ERISA is the law that governs all employee benefit plans, including long-term disability plans, and that's why I'm on the panel, because a lot of people who are working do have long-term disability insurance and short-term disability insurance provided through your employers. And so I can give you some tips for getting through that process of applying and receiving those benefits if you do become disabled by a vestibular disorder. So the question of when is the biggest question for most people when they're starting out in this process. A lot of people have been suffering from symptoms for years and managing to get through. You know, you take rest, you go home, you crash at night, you find ways to cope, because I can tell you from my experience in doing this for the last 15 years that none of my clients wants to be disabled or ever expects to be disabled. Most people have an incredible attitude of getting through life's challenges no matter what, taking care of your family, and working in a job that you love no matter what. So the turning point of when you can't manage to do that anymore is really a last resort for most people, that you would even consider altering your lifestyle and going out on disability. Typically, the number one sign that it's time for you to go on disability is when your doctor is recommending it. And it's actually something that's critical for being able to go out on disability at all. In order to have a successful application, you need to have a doctor who's 100% supportive of your disability, recommends it from a medical standpoint. But some symptoms that maybe would prompt a doctor to make those recommendations include, you know, having a hard time getting through your work tasks, like focusing on a computer screen or reading, or maybe, you know, driving is becoming a hazard and somebody has to drive you. Maybe, you know, you can't concentrate as well as you used to. You're getting dizzy, you know, when you're getting through the day, or you're getting fatigued from the effort of trying to focus. Some people are having some cognitive challenges that come, some memory issues that are coming along with this that may be interfering with your work. Or maybe if, you know, traveling as part of your job duties, if you're covering certain regions, you can't do that anymore because it's not safe for you. You know, walking is a safety hazard. And when other people around you are starting to say, look, we think you need to take a break, be easy on yourself, that may be a good sign for you to actually start to be easy on yourself and take their advice. So it's usually not one thing, but it's a whole grouping of things that makes it clear to you that you can't work anymore. But really, it's the doctor recommendation that is absolutely key. So if you start noticing a lot of these things starting to interfere with your ability to get your job done, go see your doctor, talk about your symptoms, and that is not the time for you to talk about how great you are and how well you manage, which I'm sure most people do, and we're all used to being able to say what we do well. But when you talk to your doctor, you need to talk about what limits you. And then your doctor can have a good idea for what you need to do medically in order to take care of your body and your health. Okay, should we go to the next slide? So there's a variety of different sources for disability benefits that you can apply for. The first I touched on briefly, short-term disability insurance and long-term disability insurance through your employer. Usually short-term lasts anywhere from 3 months to a year, so let's say typically 6 months. And then long-term disability insurance can kick in after that. Typically long-term lasts through retirement or through normal retirement age, which if you're born after, I think it's 1962 or something like that, that's age 67. So it can be a very lucrative benefit, and it's worth being very careful on how you apply for it to make sure that you actually get those benefits in place and going in a good forward direction that are uninterrupted so that you can have a steady source of income for years in case you're not able to get back to work. The third bullet on here is private disability insurance. This is a more expensive and less common option because nobody really expects that they're going to be disabled, including myself. We all think we're going to work through retirement. And so a lot of people don't have the foresight to buy private disability insurance, but if you do, it's just incredible. It's a wonderful benefit because that too can last through retirement, and it can provide a better source of income because the state law protections for private disability insurance are far greater than the ERISA protections for the employee benefit that is provided by your employer, and that's governed by ERISA. So if you have that insurance, that's great. Now's the time to apply for it. Fourth, state disability insurance. For those of us in California, that lasts for 1 year. You can apply after being out of work for 7 days, and it's pretty liberal. The system is pretty liberal for who gets approved. So if your doctor is supporting your disability application, you will typically get approved. It provides a percentage of your benefit up to, I think, a max of about $4,600 a month, and it's tax-free for state tax, but not for federal tax purposes. Now, that is usually going to be an offset against your ERISA benefits, the short and long-term disability insurance benefits. But while you're waiting for those benefits to kick in, it sure is nice to have the state disability in place. We also have Social Security disability insurance, which Jenny will talk about in much detail later. And then we also have workers' compensation insurance. Workers' comp is different than all of these others. It's a totally different system, but workers' comp can provide you some income replacement benefit and also some medical care benefits too. It only applies if your disability is due to a work-related injury. So if there's, for example, a traumatic brain injury at work, you know, something like that, that triggered your symptoms and caused your disability, whether it's a whole or partial disability, then workers' comp can kick in. Okay, next slide. So talking about short and long-term disability in a little more detail here, let me run you through the process of what you need to do to get started on a short or long-term disability application. The first thing you need to do is grab a copy of your policy from HR and also the application forms from HR. If you're not comfortable with HR or you don't have an HR, you can still get this information. You're actually entitled to a copy of your policy from your employer at any time. It's, you know, formally on written request, but in actuality, if you just go and say, I'd like to get a copy of my disability policy or see what employee benefit policies I have, can I get a copy of all my employee benefit plans? Your employer is required under ERISA to give those to you. And then even if HR can't give you the forms for filling out an application, you can call the insurance company. Once you get the policy, you'll see who the insurance company is. You can call them and say, I'd like to get application forms. You can even Google it and download application forms. These forms can be very tricky. Let me just give you a word of warning that it's a lot of times people get denied because the forms are not filled out correctly or the forms are filled out too literally. I encourage my clients, and when I do this for people who, you know, hire me to fill out these forms for them, I don't feel constrained by the boxes on the forms. In fact, what I do is I take a separate statement that really goes through the history, your work history, your educational history, the history of your medical condition, how it started, what your symptoms are, and, you know, have a very detailed statement and then reference that statement on the forms. The forms do not have to be the only thing you submit. To the contrary, I totally encourage you to submit as much evidence as possible, as early as possible. So what I do for my clients is I get all their medical records, I take their statements in a sworn form, I fill out the forms, of course, but then I reference the medical records and the statements. It's a really good idea to make a very thorough application because you have a better chance of getting approved. Also, your employer is going to have to fill out a form, and just make sure they do that in a timely way. It's just to verify your income and your job duties. But if you have a friendly relationship with your employer, it'd be nice for you to see a copy of it just to make sure that they're not saying anything that is different from what you're saying. And your physician is also going to have to fill out a form too, and it's good to, just have a very candid conversation with your physician about your symptoms so they can do a good job on that form. Okay, next slide. So here's a flow chart so that you can see what to do for those of us who are visual learners. So there's on the top boxes, one of them is submit an SSDI application concurrently, and Jenny will talk about that, but I actually, from the start, you want to submit an SDI, state disability application concurrently so you can get the state disability benefits rolling too. So contact HR for the documents for the short-term disability and long-term disability. Work with your doctors to get all your medical records and to let them know that they're going to have to fill out a form for you. Make sure that they're comfortable doing that and that they will do that in a timely way, or else your application is going to get denied. Once you have collected everything and filled out all the forms, submit your application. If you're approved, fantastic. You're going to receive benefits from the insurance company. You're also going to be expected to give updates at a regular interval, typically 6 months to 1 year. So you need to see your doctor regularly so that you have something to update the insurance company on. For a lot of people, this is counterintuitive. If you're in, sort of a stagnant position medically where it's not getting better but it's not worsening, you don't see the reason to see your physician. But when you're on a disability claim, you really need to see your physician regularly. Just go in for checkups every 4 to 6 months. Even if it's to say nothing's changed, so that there's ongoing medical records and that your doctor's aware of what's going on in your life too, so that they can fill out the forms for you. If your claim is denied, this is very, very critical, and I hope everyone pays attention. Under ERISA, for these employer-sponsored short and long-term disability plans, you have to submit an appeal of that denial within 180 days of the denial, or else you will lose your right to those benefits. So it's very critical that you do that in a timely way, that you adhere to the deadlines. If you're feeling overwhelmed, the earlier you reach out to an attorney, the better, because it's a very important process. In this appeal, you actually have to submit everything you could possibly ever want to rely on if your case goes to court. You will not have another opportunity in court to submit medical evidence. So anything from physicians, any outside expert reports, a vocational report, maybe a functional capacity evaluation, statements from friends, neighbors, coworkers with their observations about you, any kind of testimony or medical evidence that would support your claim should be submitted in this appeal, and it needs to be submitted within 180 days of the denial. Okay, next slide. So just explaining how these all work together, I mentioned it briefly, but let me talk about it in a little more detail, because this is not only my pet peeve, but a #1 shocker for all of my clients, which is that if, for example, your employer-sponsored disability plan says that you're entitled to 2/3 of your previous income, that's actually a coordinated benefit. And what I mean by that is that what they're guaranteeing is that through all sources of your income, you will receive a max of 2/3 of your previous income. So let's say you're under $100,000 a year, and your insurance company is MetLife. MetLife guarantees that if you're disabled under their terms of their policy, you'll receive $66,000 or so a year from all sources. Now, those sources are going to be obviously the disability plan that MetLife is insuring, but also the state disability benefits and Social Security disability benefits, workers' comp income that you're getting if it's not just for medical, so income replacement money. It's also your dependents' Social Security benefits. So under my scenario where somebody's benefit is guaranteed at $66,000 or so a year, that's about let's just say 5,000, 5,100, a little under that, $5,050 a month. I did the math quickly in my head. Now subtract from that the state disability of $4,600. Well, then that means MetLife is cutting you a check for $400 or so, and MetLife is state disability is cutting you a check for $4,600. So you see how MetLife's obligation goes down. So just because you've been approved under different sources of income, like state disability or Social Security disability, doesn't mean you're going to receive the full benefits from all of those sources. Instead, your ERISA plan is going to be decreased by the amount that you're getting from other sources. I just want to make you aware of that because people are shocked when I reveal it to them that they're not going to be entitled to multiple sources of income. So I like to educate people so they're not shocked. Okay, next slide. And I think that this, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny at this point.
All right, thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you so much, Cassie. That was wonderful. And now we're going to talk to Jenny, who is going to lead us through the process of applying for Social Security disability. Jenny?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jenny Gailey, and I'm the National Director of JetX's Social Security Program. And JetX Social Security has been providing nationwide Social Security representation now since 1994. I joined the company in 2004 as one of our attorneys. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the Social Security process. And today we're going to be talking about SSDI, which is Social Security Disability Insurance, which is an earned benefit, meaning that you have to be insured for benefits in order for you and your family members to have entitlement. So generally what that means is that people have to have worked and paid into the Social Security system, paid FICA taxes, for at least 5 out of the last 10 years from the time you stop working. There's also a requirement, there's a 5 full month waiting period. So if you're getting close to full retirement age, you have to have stopped working at least 6 months prior to full retirement age in order for there to be any entitlement. Now, Social Security considers a person disabled if they have what they call a medically determinable physical or mental impairment, or a combination of both, that prevents you from performing substantial gainful activity. And Social Security defines substantial gainful activity in 2017 as earning over the threshold of $1,170 per month. So really, someone that's engaging in just part-time work could be earning over that amount and wouldn't be eligible for Social Security benefits. The important thing to note is, though, is that if you are working part-time, as long as it's under that threshold, you can still apply. There's also a durational component to Social Security's definition of disability. So they require that a person's condition last or be expected to last for a continuous 12-month period, or be expected to result in death. And a lot of people think that what that means is that you have to wait to apply until you hit the 12-month durational requirement, and that's not true. As long as your condition is expected to last that full 12-month period, you can get awarded at any time during the process. So you don't have to wait. And if you want to go to the next slide, what we generally recommend people doing, though, is sort of looking into applying for Social Security around the 6-month mark. At that point, generally, it's pretty easy for Social Security to review your condition, review your application, and determine whether or not your condition is expected to meet that durational requirement. So the first step in the process, and we'll go over this generally, and then in the next few slides talk a little bit about each step in more detail. But the first step in the process is to file an initial application, and I strongly recommend everyone doing this online. Staffing at Social Security is spread very thin, so anything you can do to make the process simpler on them and more streamlined, the faster your application is going to move through the process. So avoiding filing a paper application is the first step in that process. So filing the application online, the local Social Security office processes it and sends it over to the state agency for review and determination. A lot of times they're called Disability Determination Services, or DDS. They're going to collect all the medical evidence, issue a decision, and unfortunately only about 33% of claims are awarded at that initial level. The good news is that Social Security advocates have a much higher rate of success. So for example, Gen X is able to get 62% of people awarded for benefits because we understand what Social Security needs, how to get the medical information from the doctor in the verbiage that Social Security understands, and it really helps to increase the chance of being awarded at that initial level. If you are awarded, you receive what's called a notice of award, and that's a document that details how much the monthly benefit's going to be, what day of the month it'll be received. It also gives information about Medicare entitlement if that person's going to be eligible for Medicare immediately. Now, if you're denied, you can file an appeal online. It's called a request for reconsideration, and it basically goes through the same process as the initial application. If that's denied, then you file a request for hearing, and you wait about 16 to 24 months at this point in order for your Social Security hearing to be scheduled. If that's denied, the next step of the process is to file a request for review with the Appeals Council. So again, here's the link to the website in order to file your initial application online. It usually takes about 45 minutes to an hour, and I would recommend that you sit down and try to get through the whole application at one time to make sure that everything is entered properly and that claim gets into the process right away. Once it gets in, like I said, Social Security will process it and forward it over to the state agency, and an examiner is going to be assigned at that state agency. One of the things they do in addition to requesting medical records from your doctors are sending out a bunch of questionnaires, activities of daily living, pain questionnaires, fatigue questionnaires, work history questionnaires. So sometimes you'll receive a packet anywhere from 20 to 30 pages of questionnaires to complete, which can be very overwhelming. One of the tips I always give is just to make sure that you get those back in a timely manner, and if you can't get them done by the deadline, to be in contact with the examiner, because one of the things that we've seen them do more and more frequently of late is deny claims based on a failure to return these questionnaires, and they say that you're not cooperative with the process. So they won't even look at the medical component. They'll just say, we never received the questionnaires, the person was non-compliant, and deny it. So be very careful about the deadlines on these questionnaires. I also suggest you think about them from a more global perspective, not what you can do on your best day, or not what happens on your worst day, but to really give a good overview of what life is really like for you. So if it says, you know, are you able to sweep, mop, vacuum? Don't just say yes if after you do that you have to lie down for an hour and take a nap. Make sure you're really being descriptive and explaining what does that activity really do to your body, and you know, can you do that every day, or is that something you can only do on one of your better days, so that you're really giving an accurate picture of your day-to-day life. It's also very important to comply with any requested doctor appointments. If Social Security doesn't feel that there's enough in your file in order to make a medical determination, they'll send you to something called a consultative exam, a CE. And again, it's one of those things, if you don't show up, if you're late, they can use that in order to deny your case. So it's very important to attend those appointments and be timely and to participate and be very vocal about your condition with that doctor. So the application processing time generally takes about 3 to 6 months. From my experience, it's on the longer end, 6 to 9 months if you do file a paper application. It can also go on a little bit longer if you're scheduled for multiple CE exams. But what I would recommend to anyone that's filed an application, if you haven't heard from Social Security and you're reaching that 6-month mark, it's always important to get in touch with them to find out, you know, what's going on, is there an issue with your claim, or perhaps maybe they did deny your case, but for whatever reason you didn't get that letter in the mail. So it's very important to keep in touch and check in on your case if you're not represented and have someone doing that for you. And again, the award rate at that level is only 33%, so I strongly recommend getting representation involved right at that initial level to increase your chance of getting awarded. Now, if you are denied, you only have 60 days to file an appeal, and this is the website in order to file your appeal online. And there are 10 states that are called prototype states. So there's basically a pilot where Social Security said, we're going to take out the reconsideration step for these 10 states, and just weigh whether or not that's beneficial to the process. Now, this pilot in Social Security fashion has been going on for 20 years, and they've still not made a final decision. But what this means is that in some states, California, Alabama, Pennsylvania, well, certain parts of California are skip reconsideration, but in those areas, if you don't have representation at the initial level and get denied, you go straight to hearing, and so you've helped yourself by getting representation, but you now have to wait until you get to that hearing, which is going to be another 2 years perhaps. So very important, especially in the skip reconsideration states, to try to have representation right at the beginning so you have the best possible chance of being awarded early on. With the request for reconsideration, your file is going back to the same state agency and goes through the same process as the initial claim. It's just with a different examiner. Processing time, again, is about 3 to 6 months. And unless there's been a major change in your condition or you have some new evidence to provide that's a lot more compelling than at the original case, most likely the claim is going to be denied with only a 12% award rate at reconsideration. If it is denied, you have the same 60-day deadline to appeal, and you're filing a request for hearing. Once that request for hearing is filed, the local Social Security office is going to send the file over to Social Security's Office of Disability Adjudication and Review. So this is a completely new office to the process from what you've been dealing with up to this point. And it takes about 16 to 24 months to receive a hearing date right now. About 5 years ago, it was only taking about a year. But unfortunately, based on a backlog of claims that's growing, there's now 1.1 million claims in that backlog. There's not enough judges or staffing to hold the hearings to accommodate them. So we're continuing to see that time frame grow. Right now, there's a lot of hearing offices that have even started taking over that 2-year mark. So unfortunately, it takes quite a long time to get that hearing. Now, once you go to your hearing, it takes an additional 30 to 90 days to get a written decision from the judge. So even if the judge at hearing says, I'm going to be granting your claim, until you have that letter in hand, it's not official. Now, if the judge denies the claim, you could file a request for review with the Appeals Council. You still have a 60-day time frame to appeal. And this is a link to the form. Unfortunately, that form is not yet available online, but you would fax it in directly to Social Security in order to file your appeal.
All right. Thank you so much, Jenny, for that. And we will, I'm sure a lot of people have questions. We're going to get to those at the end. But I just want to, this is Cynthia again, I just want to say that this is a complicated process. You know, when I look at the, I mean, we create these flow charts to make it look easy, but there are a lot of steps and a lot of opportunities to get denied. So my recommendation is for you to seek help early in the process. There's no downside to seeking help. There's only an upside. Talk to the people who are professionals. It's kind of like, you know, going to seek help from a medical professional who is a specialist in a certain area. We all know that most vestibular patients don't get diagnosed by their primary care provider. You have to see a specialist. So find a specialist who can help you through the process of applying for long-term and short-term disability, if those are options for you, Social Security disability, and I don't know if there's anybody on the call who lives outside the United States. I'm sure the processes are different there, but the general idea here is the same. Seek help, professional help to help you through these processes. GenX that Jenny works for is one of those services that helps with Social Security disability, and Cassie is one of the attorneys that helps patients apply for long and short-term disability. So I'm sure that they would be available to help, and their information will be at the end of this presentation. So tips. So we know the process. So what tips can we give you that will help you as a vestibular patient complete your disability claim and have the best chance of being accepted, because we all know that having a vestibular disorder is unique. You know, you don't look sick necessarily, and sometimes people don't believe that you can be disabled if outwardly you don't look sick. You know, if you're not in a wheelchair or missing a limb, you know, how they might not. It's harder to explain to people what your limitations are if it's not if it's invisible to them. So let's talk about some tips that will help you in your application process. So first tip, and both Jenny and Cassie were talking about this, make sure your doctor knows how important it is for them to fill out the disability forms promptly, and it's kind of, you know, you might say, well, I'm gonna, you know, I'll send the doctor the form and they have to fill it out, and you kind of count on them to do that. Don't. You know, it's up to you to be following up with your doctor, to be communicating with them so that they understand what your disability, I mean, they know the medical reasons for your disability, but you need to make sure that they are communicating accurately. Why are you disabled now? What's different about now? So for example, if you have Meniere's disease, and which is progressive, you know, and you've been able to function in your job up to now, and now you can't for one reason or another. What's different? Why are you disabled now? Make sure that your doctor explains your symptoms accurately, and that they are clear that you have been able to explain your symptoms accurately as well. We all know that describing dizziness is not easy. There are a lot of reasons that you can be dizzy. So make sure that your doctor is clear about your symptoms and how they are impacting you. Talk to your doctor about your job and what the requirements of your job are, so that your doctor can make an accurate assessment and explain it well on the forms why you are not able to perform the activities of your job. And as both Cassie and Jenny mentioned, schedule regular checkups. The insurance companies will be requesting updates on your medical record, and they also want to see that you know, if you're checking in with your doctor regularly, it's more of an indication that you need, you know, that you do need that assistance, that you need to be checking in with your doctor. So make sure you're talking to your doctor on a regular basis. So let's talk about your symptoms. If there are tests obviously, if you've gone through the process of getting a diagnosis, you've probably gone through numerous tests. You may have been to an audiologist and a physical therapist to do tests that assess your balance system and maybe your hearing, but there might be other tests that would also assess not just what's physically wrong with you, but and what your symptoms are, but how they impact you. For example, cognitive tests. Make sure to track your symptoms. VITA has some tracking tools on our website that you can use. Track your symptoms so that you can show the change over time. Be specific about your symptoms, and not just your symptoms, but your activities. We have some forms that can help you to track, okay, I was doing this and it made me feel this way, so that you can kind of connect how your symptoms are impacting your ability to do normal day-to-day things. Don't just talk about your balance system. Your visual system is very much a part of your overall wellness as a vestibular patient. Many of you have, you know, auditory disturbances, if you have tinnitus, if you have hearing loss. And of course, we always want to bring that back to, we'll talk more about this, how it impacts your ability to do your job. One of the things, I think this is really, really key, that I hear from I would say most vestibular, if not all vestibular patients, is problems with concentration and or memory. And those are almost hands down going to have an impact on your job. So making sure to include those in your description and get those validated. As I heard Jenny and Cassie saying, you want to be validating them not only by these tests, but by validation from people who know you and your doctors. Also, emphasize the
And sorry, Cynthia, it's Cassie. Can I jump in for 1 second on that point, which is that yes, the cognitive impact is great and can be extremely helpful in proving your disability. The best way to do that is to get testing from a neuropsychologist who can run you through a battery of tests to objectively identify how you're cognitively impaired. And the results of those tests are considered very valid and objective and accepted by insurance companies as supportive of disability. You just need to make sure to communicate with that neuropsychologist that this is for a disability application, and so that they make sure to talk about what limits you from doing work.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Absolutely. As we said, there are very specific tests that you can do that measure that, and you should make sure to do those early on. Also, as I said, emphasizing the unpredictable nature of your vestibular disorder. One day you feel great, the next day you don't. I tell the story of one of VITA's ambassadors who was applying for disability, and the person who was evaluating her said, well, you look, you know, you're dressed well, your hair is nice, and you have makeup on, you must be fine. There's no way that you could be disabled. But, you know, maybe that particular day she was able to get up and get dressed, but the next day she was wiped out. So that's really an important part to emphasize. And again, be honest about your limitations. This was covered as well, but I just want to reiterate it. You know, some things you can do, some things you can't do, some things you can do sometimes, other things you can't do other times. List how long it takes you to complete these tasks, especially if they're work-related, but they don't have to be work-related, just your everyday tasks. You know, does it take you longer to complete this task because since you have been diagnosed with this vestibular disorder? And you know, what kind of help do you need? I talk to people all the time who say, you know, I can do this, but I need a lot of help with it, you know, or I can't do this anymore. You know, my husband has to cook now, and my children have to do the cleaning for me. I even need my children, my older children, to help me get around. So talk about the help that you need. And these are hard things. It's really hard to talk about your own limitations. You know, we all want to see ourselves in the most positive light, and we also want to see ourselves at our best and not at our worst. But just, you know, this is a time to have compassion for yourself and for the difficulty that this vestibular disorder has put on you, and to acknowledge that these things are, you know, these are difficult, and it's okay to acknowledge that. So talk about your social activities. You know, do you are you not able to go out to social functions? I know a lot of vestibular patients say, I really have a difficult time being in groups of people because of all the motion and everybody talking at the same time. I have difficult times in the grocery store. I have difficult times in the mall. You know, talk about these things specifically. And as Cassie was saying, don't feel constrained by the forms. Just be as complete as possible in the explanation of your limitations. And again, you've got to relate it back to your job. You know, what are the requirements of your job, and how do your limitations apply? You know, the cognitive issues are probably going to be the most direct thing that you can talk about, but what about your physical limitations? Fatigue how does that impact you? And that can impact you. I mean, we're not just talking about a job that is highly physical, you know, for example, if you do manual labor, but I mean, even a desk job, fatigue can really affect you. Do you need to take frequent breaks because of your physical fatigue, or because of your, you know, how it affects your cognitive abilities? Vision obviously is going to play a big role, and that you know, also plays a role in, you know, if you have a computer job, if you're in front of a computer all the time and it's difficult for you to be looking at a computer screen, that's really an important thing to point out. Is driving a part of your job? Is standing a part of your job? I recommend taking, you know, making sure to get from your human resource department a job description and a list of the, and if they don't have it, you know, make a detailed list of all the little things that you do in your job, physical, mental, visual, and then draw an arrow to, you know, what is it that, you know, that makes it difficult for me to do that particular task. And covering your bases, getting information from experts. The Vestibular Disorders Association has some articles on our website about how vestibular disorders impact you on a cognitive level, how they impact your vision, how they impact your balance. Print those out, attach them to your application. And as it says here, make sure that when if you are manually sending things, that you're sending things, make sure you're sending things in a way where you get confirmation that they have been received. If you're doing it online, great, print out that confirmation that you received online, and if you're sending it by mail, make sure that you're getting a signature to confirm that it has been received. So I am going to pass this off to Holly now, who is going to tell us about her story going through this process, specifically what she did and how it impacted her, and how difficult it was. Holly?
Hi, everybody. My name is Holly Fisher. I'm going to take you through my own personal story. I do want to stress this is my personal story. I'm sure if you talk to a dozen different people who went through the process, they'd have a dozen different circumstances that they went through. I am a vestibular patient. In 2003, I went on a cruise, and when I came off that cruise, I had some fainting spells, and I started getting worse and worse in terms of being extremely dizzy, unable to walk, unable to concentrate. And I am one of those people who launched into this process because I had doctors and coworkers and friends turning to me and saying, there is really something wrong with you. You need to go start to see people. I was diagnosed pretty early on with mal de débarquement, or disembarking syndrome, which is when a person comes off of a cruise or a long flight and their brain just never kind of rights itself. My brain still thinks that I'm rocking on a time. So I was back at work after coming off of that cruise and getting worse and worse. And so I had some folks at work who kind of took me aside and said, please go see a doctor. You're stumbling around. I know you're not feeling well. And so I went through a series of doctor visits and a lot of tests and was diagnosed fairly quickly, and then was quickly directed to try from my doctor and from my coworkers to try first doing short-term disability to see if things could be resolved with some rest. I came out of, I was in a consulting career, a management consulting job, very high intensity, lots of hours, lots of travel, lots of stress, and they felt that it was really important for me to start to take a break to try to get past some of the worst of the symptoms. So I did start out in short-term disability, working through my HR department. That was a pretty straightforward process, and had the right doctor's notes and things like that to confirm that. I did go on disability. It was about 6 months. I came back to work. I tried it again. Unfortunately, any improvements after being on disability got worse again. I tried working part-time. I tried work with no travel because my travel was extensive for another, say, 6 to 8 months. At which point my doctor said to me, okay, it's time. You're going to need to take a longer-term break. I cannot help you if you don't take that break. And believe me, as a person who had who was an intelligent person with a successful career, it was a very difficult decision for me to make that decision and to agree to that. But I did recognize that I was not only very tired myself and making a lot of mistakes myself, I was causing, problems at work where I wasn't able to do what I needed to do, and finding that I was making mistakes that really weren't acceptable anymore, and causing a lot of stress at home because my family would describe me as coming back from work and basically crashing and being completely unavailable to anybody for the next 48 hours until I recuperated enough to go back to work. So my doctor helped me through that process, and working through HR, I was approved for long-term disability. It took about 12 months to get through that process, and then started on long-term disability. Probably 6 to 9 months after being on disability, my insurer, who was Unum Insurance, let me know that I was essentially required to apply for Social Security disability insurance because I was going to be in that category of somebody who was going to be disabled for 12 months or more. In my circumstances, I was assigned, it happened to be a Gen X representative who took me through the Social Security disability process. That was, I think, an arrangement between Unum and Gen X where they understood that, to successfully get to that process, having an expert made it more successful. And it wasn't out of the goodness of their heart, of course, that the insurance company was doing that. They understand that the success rate is higher, and therefore, as they mentioned earlier in the presentation, that there would be a coordination of benefits that came out of that where the insurer would have less financial responsibility if Social Security was a part of my benefit. I did go through all 3 steps of that process before being approved, so I was denied. It took quite a while. I'd say the whole process took at least 2 years from the time we started into the Social Security disability process, where I did end up in a courtroom with an attorney from Gen X representing me, and with the judge who ultimately agreed that I was disabled and should be awarded Social Security disability. So that's kind of my personal story. I have my own set of slides of recommendations that we can go to the next slide, and I'll start to just share a little bit of advice of some things, and some of these reinforce things you've already heard, but there's some particular things that I have found not only getting through the process in the first place, but also continuing to be a disabled person and how to kind of keep up on all this. The biggest advice I can have is to keep your own health records, and I literally have a binder and a big folio where I have all of my doctor's notes, copies of all test results, actual films from MRIs or blood work. I keep a long list of medications. If you're a vestibular patient, you've probably tried a gazillion different kinds of medications, and it can be hard to go back and historically remember everything you tried or didn't try. It's not only useful, of course, for this process, but for any discussion you have with any of your groups of doctors. And if you're probably like a lot of vestibular patients, you probably have more than one doctor, and you might have seen various doctors over the years. So I do keep a list of all of the doctors I've seen, their contact information, what dates I saw them, why I was seeing them. That includes, everything from neuro-otologists to PT people. And I do keep in those binders copies of any past paperwork. Unfortunately, we are in a system where we have to be our own advocate, and to rely on your doctor's offices or Social Security or even your insurer to have the records that go back, especially if you're dealing with this over many years, it's not going to work. You're going to find gaps. So when you go in and get the tests, ask for a copy, and ask for a copy of the scans, which of course now most people do, can send you a disc of them. I would also suggest building the library of your own condition. So we mentioned health logs, and keeping your personal health logs and saving copies of those, and having credible resources. I've found a lot of important information on the Vestibular Disorders Association website, on Mayo Clinic's website, other medical journals, because as a vestibular patient we know, as Cynthia mentioned, a lot of times we look perfectly normal from the outside. So having a credible resource that says, no, this person really does have something wrong and they are not making this up, this is true, and these are all the, scientific evidence supporting that this is a real condition and what it does in terms of a person's ability to function normally, were very important for me through the process, being able to pull those resources out and use them as evidence in my cases. I did send in copies of articles when I submitted my applications. And I also suggest getting really good at telling your story. We mentioned before being clear about what your symptoms are, how variable they can be, how it really does limit you, what's harder to do, what's not possible to do, all the help you need. And you don't want to be dramatic, but you also want to be very clear about it. And I think if you practice understanding that story, writing that story down for yourself, telling it to your family members, having them validate or invalidate some of the things you're saying. Maybe you're glossing over something and they're saying, oh, no, it's much worse than that. I don't think you realize how many times you go and crash on the couch because you are just done, or whatever your circumstances are. You want to be really good at telling that story as you go through this process so that you can be clear and concise about what it is that you're dealing with and how it directly impacted you not being able to do what you're supposed to do in your job. And then, as everyone else has mentioned, you really do need to see your doctors regularly. You have to demonstrate ongoing care and efforts to improve. They want to understand that you want to get back to work and that you're showing you are sincerely trying to manage your own health and your own care and get better. And then, that allows you to build the relationship with your doctors and the office staff who are going to be a part of filling out that paperwork for you. I'll go to the next slide. Just to reinforce a couple of those things you also heard, read your plan descriptions end to end. Every company's different. They're complex. Seek the help of experts if you can. I really do recommend that. Do not be late in responding to requests. Remind your doctors about what you need. Even when you go for a regular visit, say, hey, I'll probably be in touch soon for some paperwork for my insurer or for Social Security. Don't be surprised by this request to go to a quote-unquote outside doctor for a quote-unquote independent review of your case, and don't be discouraged because they may not be as understanding with you as your regular doctor has been. If you change your contact information, make sure you tell your insurer or Social Security that, because they will not forgive you if the paperwork didn't get to you because they didn't have your up-to-date information. So update them and make sure to check in that they got the updates. Next slide. And similar advice related to Social Security. Read everything you can about the process to understand it. It's complicated. Seek out the help of the experts that are available. I do recommend when you fill out any of the forms to go fill them out in pencil first, reread it, have others read it with you before you submit it. I've even sat down and taken notes with my doctors and looked at it together, given them notes to help them as they're filling it out. If they're saying, remind me again what you do in your job, I just give them notes about that so they don't have to recall from just a discussion. Do be aware that there aren't a lot of codes in Social Security's world about vestibular disorders, so it's a little bit perhaps more of an uphill battle for us to get these approvals. And be very careful if anybody starts to talk about somatic codes or anything like that. That is not calling your vestibular disorder a physical disorder or a true disorder. They're calling it somatic or in your mind, and going into that category will cause you other problems that are not accurate for our particular conditions. And just real quickly to mention that SSDI is sometimes paid to dependent children, which is coordinated with your other benefits. And don't be surprised if you were paid long-term disability for a while and then you were awarded Social Security, and then you have to pay back the LTD insurer what Social Security paid you in retro. So if, in my case, it took several years to get awarded Social Security, but they went back and paid me for the years while I was still in the process, which meant I was double paid. So that payment that the LTD insurer had paid had to be paid back. I think that's all of my information.
Yeah, and I think that's just so amazing, Holly. You've done such a great job for yourself, and I loved all of your tips, especially about being sure to recognize that the insurer is not your friend. They are a business. They come across, you know, like they're your friend, but I tell all my clients that they're in the business of collecting premiums, not of paying benefits. If they paid benefits
Absolutely.
to everyone, then they'd be out of business. So just be very careful. I don't want to take up too much time, but I was just piggybacking on what Holly did so in such a beautiful way to give one of my client stories. And the main point I want to bring up from this story is that I was successful in getting my client approved. He had a gusher during ear implant surgery that caused a permanent vestibular disorder. I got him approved under initially, but then 24 months later, this is the case in almost all insurance disability plans, the standard of disability changes from being disabled from your regular occupation to being disabled from any occupation in order for you to qualify for benefits. Now, I think it's pretty easy to prove for your kinds of conditions because you need to, if you can talk about the cognitive side of it, or that you get dizzy when at a computer screen, you can easily show that, you know, even in a sedentary job, you can't do your job. But it's a very tricky time, and it's just a heads up that somewhere around 24 months, you're going to get a hard look from the insurance company as if there's a way for them to cut off your claim at that point. So gear up for it, and, you know, starting at about 18 months past your initial claim date, go back to your doctors, reassess your condition, make sure they're still all on board, and then go through all the things in a declaration that you are limited from doing that are even sedentary, such as what happens to you when you sit and look at a computer screen, what happens to you when you try to read a book, you know, what happens when you're trying to follow along visually watching a TV show or a movie, and identify those for the insurance company to make it easier for them to approve you. Once you're approved past that 24 months, in my experience, you're in pretty good territory. You just have to, you know, supply updates every year or so from your doctor, and as long as there's no red flags there, then you should be in good shape. That's all I wanted to highlight from that slide.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for all that you had contributed to that, to Cassie and to Jenny and to Holly. I want to make sure that you all have know where to get additional resources. This is where you go to find out about Social Security disability. This is information from the Department of Labor about disability resources, the disability resources on VITA's website, and also how to access services from Gen X and from Cassie should you decide to apply for disability. And as I said, I do recommend that you seek out professional services to do that. So I want to make sure you have all that contact information. Now, we're kind of short on time, but I'm going to see if we have some questions that we can maybe answer here. Someone.
So just to, sorry, a quick correction. I just saw that my email is listed with a different spelling of my first name. So my email is actually CASSIE, Cassie at benefitslaw.com. So don't try that other one or else it will never get to me. But you can see it on my website too. Thanks, Cassie. Apologies, and we'll make sure to get that updated. So let's see. We've got someone who has been disabled since early childhood and unable to physically attend high school, college, has never been able to hold a job. Can they apply for disability? Does anyone want to address that?
I'm sorry, what was the end of the question?
I think
the question is, if someone has never had a job, they've been disabled since childhood, can they still apply for disability?
From a Social Security perspective, they wouldn't be insured for Social Security disability benefits, but there is a program called Supplemental Security Income, which is a need-based program for disabled. So based on their financial situation, they could be entitled to SSI benefits, and I would encourage them to reach out to Social Security to find out.
Excellent.
Yeah, I agree with that, and there wouldn't be any ERISA benefits, unfortunately, because those flow from having a job.
Okay, excellent. Now someone was asking, they said that they've been on long-term disability for 4 months. Should they wait for them to start the SSID or SSDI process, or should they start it on their own?
I mean, Jenny, you can chime in, but I think start it on your own. The sooner you start, the better. And then, or you could reach out to Gen X or anyone to help you through that process.
Right.
But I think it's better to start sooner rather than later.
I would agree with that, and a lot of long-term disability carriers work with vendors, either Gen X or companies similar to Gen X, so it's always a good idea to speak with your the person you're working with at your LTD company to find out if those services are available to you free of charge.
Great. Now, here's a good one. Can you work part-time even while receiving SSDI or other disability?
From the Social Security perspective, you can. There's a threshold which triggers what's called a trial work period. So if you're working below that threshold, then you can continue to work indefinitely. Or if you're working above that threshold and you're on Social Security disability, they give you 9 full months in a rolling 60-month period to sort of test the waters, because they want to encourage people to see if they're able to get back into the workforce without terminating their Social Security benefits. So it's definitely worth pursuing. And this year it's $840 per month that would trigger the trial work period. But again, you get 9 months above that threshold before your benefits are impacted.
Great. Now, here's another one that actually I think...
Sorry, just to back up for a second, this is Holly though. That's for Social Security. You would have to understand the plan that you have for long-term disability, because long-term disability may not have any ability for you to do that without revoking your long-term disability status. So you'd have to understand your needs.
That's true. Yeah, read the, like Holly said, read the plan very thoroughly. A lot of plans do have partial disability benefits, but work earnings are typically an offset against your disability benefit. So you have to weigh the impact of that and whether it's worth it to you from a health perspective. But also, from a strategy perspective, my experience is that insurance companies counterintuitively perhaps treat people who are partially working with more scrutiny than people who are on total disability. They actually make a leap in logic like, well, if you can do 10 hours a week, why can't you do 40? Without a lot of evidence to back it up. So you'll get harder looks at more regular intervals if you are partially working. Not trying to deter anyone, because a lot of people really need to do that for a lot of reasons, but just be aware that it could have a negative impact on your disability benefits.
Great, thank you for that. Excellent. So what about, here's someone they've been self-employed for 7 years, they didn't draw a salary, sold the business due to their vestibular disorder. Do they qualify for Social Security disability?
It's all going to depend on their insured status from prior to the time that they were working. So what I would do is, if you log on to Social Security's website, there's something called a My SSA account that you can create, and you can go in and see whether or not you have insured status and what's been reported to Social Security on your record. So I think it's always a good idea to take a look to see how previous earnings may impact that, and then, if you can't figure it out from there, to either reach out to a Social Security advocacy group or just call Social Security directly, because sometimes there's previous work that shows up that you didn't expect to show up. Sometimes even part-time or seasonal work, things that you're doing where you're not earning a lot of income, where you're not reporting a lot of income, can still get you credit. So it's always a good idea to double check that.
Great. So we're running over, but I'm going to put this one last question out there, because I think it's a good one. This person says, I paid into FICA 30 years ago for 6 years. I went straight into teaching, and I have private disability insurance. I've been a teacher in California for the past 28 years. I'm assuming there's no need to file for Social Security disability. What would you recommend?
I would say that she's probably correct, but again, I always tell people just to check with Social Security just in case. There also may be some Medicare entitlements. Sometimes different STRS programs have people paying Medicare taxes versus just paying FICA. And so you can apply for Medicare as a disabled individual, but you have to go through the same medical determination process if you're under full retirement age as someone applying for regular Social Security disability. So I would definitely contact Social Security just to confirm what you might be entitled to. But most likely there won't be any entitlement to Social Security disability in that type of situation if she's been paying into the STRS program.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for your professional expertise, and Holly for sharing your story. I want to remind everyone that this has been recorded. It will be available on VITA's YouTube channel and our website, and you can get more information on disability from VITA's website. And if you have any questions about this, feel free to contact VITA at our 800 number, 800-837-8428, or info@vestibular.org. Thanks again, everyone, and I hope that if you do decide to apply for disability, that the process is smooth and you are successful.